The War of the Worlds is one of the greatest science fiction novels of all time. The story has had many reprints and retellings, and has inspired many generations of writers and filmmakers. But what was the story behind the story? What inspired Herbert George Wells to write his epic novel? I've always been a fan of The War of the Worlds, ever since seeing the 1953 film adaptation on television. The Martian fighting machines were amazing and terrifying, while the World War II-style action was exciting for a preteen boy. Later, I bought the premiere issue of the Marvel Comics version of the story, featuring a silly-looking hero named Killraven. Well, at least the fighting machines looked pretty good. As a teenager, I read the novel and was surprised to find the Martians attacking Victorian England at the end of the 19th century. There was a lot of tension as the hero moved through war-torn London, and excitement when the Martians fought the Royal Navy. As a father, I shared my love of the story with my two sons. We even enjoyed the 2005 feature film starring Tom Cruise. Oops, not that one. Not that one. There it is. This movie had great special effects, exciting action, and a couple of kids who are not happy about the invasion.
Kind of fun, isn't it?
No.
The theme of the War of the Worlds is terrifying. An alien force arrives on Earth and starts a campaign of death and destruction. When he was young, my oldest son did not like the 1953 film. He said it was too scary, because you can't do anything to stop the attack. All you can do is run and hide. And I thought, that's the point. The story was first published in magazines in 1897, then as a novel in 1898, and I wondered, where did a British author from the late 19th century get such a terrifying idea for a science fiction story? Wells himself provides the answer in Chapter 1, The Eve of War. We must remember what ruthless and utter destruction our own species has wrought, not only upon animals, but upon inferior races. The Tasmanians were entirely swept out of existence in a war of extermination waged by European immigrants in the space of 50 years. Are we such apostles of mercy as to complain if the Martians warred in the same spirit? Anthony West, one of H.G. Wells' sons, added to his father's point. Suppose that living creatures were to come to Earth from another planet, from Mars, say, being so far ahead of Earthlings technologically and in every other way as to make it impossible for them to think of us as fellow creatures. So what exactly happened in Tasmania to inspire Wells to write his great novel? Tasmania is a large island southeast of mainland Australia. 3 times larger than the big island of Hawaii, Tasmania has a cool climate and 4 distinct seasons. The island is about as far south from the equator as New York and Boston are north. The book Guns, Germs, and Steel describes the isolation of the native population. The most isolated people on Earth in recent history were the Aboriginal Tasmanians, living without ocean-going watercraft on an island 100 miles from Australia. The Tasmanians had no contact with other societies for 10,000 years and acquired no new technology other than what they invented themselves. They were isolated because, according to Lonely Planet Tasmania, when the last ice age ended, glaciers retreated, sea levels rose. Cut off by the rising sea, the peninsula that was Tasmania floated away from mainland Australia. When finally encountered by Europeans, first by Dutch explorer Abel Tasman, in AD 1642, the Tasmanians had the simplest material culture of any people in the modern world. Like mainland Aborigines, they were hunter-gatherers without metal tools, but they also lacked many technologies and artifacts widespread on the mainland. Lonely Planet Tasmania describes how a British governor in Australia established permanent settlements and prison colonies in Tasmania in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Things soon turned hostile as European fences and farming encroached on Aboriginal hunting grounds and significant places. By the 1820s, these territorial disputes had developed into the so-called Black Wars. Aboriginal groups were systematically murdered, arrested, or forced at gunpoint from districts settled by whites. Arsenic on bread and steel traps designed to catch humans were used. Many more people succumbed to European diseases, against which they had no immunity. In 1804, the year of the first white settlement at Hobart, there may have been as many as 7,000 Aboriginals. By 1824, there were only a few hundred left. Truganini was the last survivor of the group of the last 135 Tasmanians captured and shipped to a reservation on Flinders Island. She died in 1876, aged 64. Descendants of Tasmanian Aboriginals survived on other islands and later returned to Tasmania. The good news is the genocide against the natives of Tasmania was not complete. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, in Tasmania, 30,000 people identified as Aboriginal and/or Torres Strait Islander in the 2021 Census of Population and Housing. The story of the War of the Worlds ends much differently for the people of Earth than the story of the Tasmanian Aborigines. The Martian invasion stops suddenly, or the Martians die from diseases they got from the humans they were conquering. This is similar to what is described in Guns, Germs, and Steel. In the New Guinea lowlands and in tropical northern Australia did malaria and other tropical diseases force Europeans to abandon their 19th century attempts at settlements, which succeeded only with the development of 20th century medicine. Why did H.G. Wells choose such a different ending for his criticism of expanding empires? Maybe he needed to end on a positive if cautious note, so the readers are not overwhelmed by doom and gloom. Yes, the Tasmanian Aborigines were nearly killed off, but the human race survives, and I understand that gives little comfort to the people who suffered so much. Personally, I do not blame just the Europeans for their rough treatment of natives in foreign lands. History is full of conflict, from empires fighting empires, to empires fighting smaller nations and tribes tribes fighting tribes. Not only did the Europeans conquer much of the world, but the Mongols conquered China and Eastern Europe, while the Aztecs, Comanches, and Zulus conquered neighboring tribes in the Western Hemisphere and Southern Africa. Wars sweep back and forth through human history like waves in a turbulent sea. Many nations have taken their turn as conqueror and conquered. In the epilogue to the War of the Worlds, Wells wrote about how life always expands its territory. Dim and wonderful is the vision I have conjured up in my mind of life spreading slowly from this little seabed of the solar system through the inanimate vastness of sidereal, distant space. Tasmania itself has moved past its history as a penal colony, inflicting great suffering on British prisoners and island natives. Driven by compelling tourism marketing and a burgeoning food and wine scene, the state's positive and cosmopolitan profile is far removed from the negative preconceptions of just a few decades ago. As for the rest of us, can there ever be an end to the cycle of war and conquest? In his book, The Fate of Empires, Sir John Glubb expresses both doubt and hope. Men bursting with courage, energy, and self-confidence cannot easily be restrained from subduing their neighbors, and men who see the prospect of wealth open to them will not readily be prevented from pursuing it. These doubts, however, need not prevent us from attempting to acquire more knowledge on the rise and fall of great powers, or from endeavoring, in the light of such knowledge, to improve the moral quality of human life. If we could accept our differences as beyond our control, there would be no excuse for our hating one another because of them. The noblest and most spiritual of all religions seem to reach the conclusion that love is the key to human life. Any expansion of our knowledge which may lead to a reduction in hate is therefore surely well worthwhile. Thank you for watching. Please like this video and see the description below for some of the books and films featured here.